Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Street Level with Chris Chermak. I hope you enjoyed last week's episode with Gary Duncan. We talked about the history of Ireland briefly, and we talked about the history of the St. Patrick Day Parade here in Scranton. I thought it was a great show. I hope you guys enjoyed it. This week, we have a little different direction we're going. We're going to talk with Kathy Wallace from the Northeast Suicide Prevention Initiative. In the state that we're in with this pandemic, I think now is a good time to get a little bit of suicide information out. So I hope you enjoy this show. So here's Kathy Wallace. So Kathy, I guess the first thing I want to ask you, because I really don't know, is what got you to be so passionate about suicide prevention and getting involved?
A lot of people are afraid to ask me if I've lost someone. So I start out with that. I've not lost someone
Which I knew
to suicide.
That. I knew that.
Interesting story, and then I'll get back to how I got here. I was doing suicide prevention for a few years, and I went out to dinner with my mother and father, who were both in their 90s at the time. And all of a sudden, my father said, "Do you know that when I was 9 years old, I found my grandfather hanging?" And he never told anyone, never told my mother, never told anyone. So how I got into it was through my job. I was working at an agency that was part of a federal grant, the Garrett Lee Smith grant. Garrett Lee Smith was a young college-age young man who lost his life to suicide. And his father was a United States Senator. So he got money to do suicide prevention grants all over the country. Pennsylvania applied for one, and it was the first grant, the first state that was working with primary care doctors, doing a survey every time a young person ages 14 to 24 came in their office. And what it did then is that these kids were on a computer, answered a bunch of questions. It spit out a report for their doctor to see before she saw them for whatever they were there for. And I was a site coordinator for Lackawanna County and for Luzerne County.
Okay.
And I was making visits to physicians' offices, trying to get them to be a part of this grant, which was very, very difficult because they weren't getting paid for it. And I'm going to put a plug in for Linda Thomas. She was absolutely wonderful. She really led the state in all that she did. So I would also, if somebody came up with a positive screen, I would call their family to see if they needed any help getting into treatment. Should they follow up? Any questions that we could ask? And because I was a part of that grant, there was some fabulous trainings that also went with that. In the middle of all this, I got a call from a woman who lost her sister to suicide, and she was having a fundraiser. And we became very good friends, and we're still friends. She's moved out of the area. But even though I have a master's degree in a mental health field, I knew nothing about suicide. And that really just upset me. And so I'm going to all these trainings thinking of all these people that treat people who come to them for help, and they know very, very little about suicide prevention. And unfortunately, it's still like that.
It is.
Yeah.
We'll get into that a little bit later too. But
so that's how I got into it. Okay. And then I made friends with suicide prevention leaders all over the state. And then I was approached by a group of people to become a part of a nonprofit. So there was maybe about, at that time, 12 of us. And we started the Northeastern Suicide Prevention Initiative. And that's how we got here.
Okay. So, and I'm looking over my notes here, but the myths about suicide, what What do you think about?
We could do 3 hours on
Yes,
the
we
myths of
could.
suicide.
Yes.
But there's certain myths that are so important. And when I do a training, I tell people, if you don't remember anything, remember this. Don't be afraid to ask someone. If you're getting some vibes or a feeling that they're not doing well, please don't be afraid to ask them, are you thinking of ending your life? Are you thinking of suicide? It's a myth that's going to put it into their head, the thought into their head. And that really was so strong in schools. We
Right.
couldn't do any trainings because
Don't mention the word.
administration said,
Yep.
don't mention the word, and because it'll put the idea into their head. And in fact, it's just the opposite, Chris. It gives someone a chance to talk. Yes, I am feeling bad. Yeah, I do need help. That it's hard to bring up. But if you're asked about it, it really makes a big difference. That's the biggest myth, I think.
Well, and it's a tough question to ask somebody.
Oh, it's very hard.
And
Even a lot of therapists feel very uncomfortable asking that question.
well, and I'm glad we're doing this now. I mean, we're hopefully starting to come out of a pandemic.
Yeah.
And I know since we've been talking and that we're hoping that doesn't start to increase as we come out.
Yes.
People think that maybe it's the worst time would be during and in the middle of it, but it's actually not.
And it's not any big disaster. People think that automatically. People are going to be so despondent.
Right.
And now, especially with the pandemic, isolation, which is a big thing, really is a big risk factor. But I think my theory is that people don't feel so alone. They know everybody's in this.
And and coming out also coming into, and a lot of people, we were just talking about that earlier, or before we come on the show, we talked about when the biggest, what do you want to say, when it's the most prevalent is some people think it's around the holidays, and it's not. It's April, May.
It's usually in the spring.
And that's where we're coming into
Yes,
now, coming out of a pandemic
absolutely.
into
In the spring.
to the spring.
Yeah.
So this is a good time to talk about this
Absolutely.
and get the word out. So very important. And I know people want to know, does anybody have an idea what causes thoughts of suicide?
There's not one thing. And I think everybody wants an easy answer.
Easy answer, sure.
And one thing that I certainly know is that everybody thinks there's a specific reason. And unfortunately, a lot of people think someone's to blame. And it's not. We have to think of suicide the way we think of physical health problems. That you would never say, Anthony Bourdain, he had so much to live for. Why did he end his life? He was wealthy. He was in a profession that he met people. He had to love it.
Yep.
Would they say that if we found out that he had kidney disease? Oh, my God, Anthony Bourdain, why did he get kidney disease? Which leads me to a really important thing that helps fight the stigma. It's a physical health problem, whether it's a depression or whether it's a psychological rage, whatever. There's not one thing. And there hasn't been a lot of research on it. There hasn't really been a lot of money put towards research for suicide and suicide prevention. And so, but we do know you have to start thinking of it in a different way if we're ever going to help people.
Well, so, and the interest that I have in it, I don't know how many years ago it was, but I lost my cousin, which I was fairly close with, and it was a shock to me. And his was more, I would say, in the rage sector. Not so much a depression. And then, not too many years ago, I lost a very good friend, and his was more of the depression side of things. I still see his smile every day. He always had a smile, so he hid it well.
Yeah. And the thing is, even with your cousin Chris, you really don't know.
I don't know
what went on for months before that.
Years.
Because
what was going on in his head?
It's the stigma. People don't talk about it, especially men, and they don't ask for help.
Don't ask for directions.
Yeah, that's right.
That's my wife.
Yes.
Thank God for my cell phone with navigation.
Yes.
Well, what else we want to say? Talk about...
How about one of the let's go back to asking someone a little bit.
Well, there's just so many things. Like I'm
know,
looking at
there
my
is.
notes, and I'm like,
Yeah.
how there's just so many things, and I
there
want to
really
kind of
is.
stay in a progression here.
Yeah.
But
We don't know. One of the myths is, once again, there has to be a reason. It has to be someone's fault. One of the things that really is a touchy subject with suicide prevention is lethal means.
mm-hmm.
I've been to suicide prevention task forces that the minute lethal means, the subject comes up, everybody says, oh, no, can't talk about that, can't talk about that. And that's so wrong because nobody's saying get rid of guns, whatever. It talks about safety.
Right.
Safety. If you have someone who's in that space, what we call it like a psychological storm, if they have pills or if they have other means and if they have a gun, if they have the gun, they're going to use it and there's no turning back.
Mm-hmm.
If there's another means that they're thinking about using, there's time for it to be interrupted. There's time for them to reach out for help. And so when it comes to the myths, the one myth is, well, if you take away the gun, they're just going to try something else. And that's not true. That 90-some% of people who may think of suicide and may have an attempt don't go on to have another attempt. Some do.
Mm-hmm.
Some do. But most of the people don't. And so I've heard so many different comments about suicide. And the bottom line is we really don't know that much about it.
Yeah, the same person that would take his own life with a firearm might not be the same person that would jump off a very high
Absolutely
bridge
right.
or...
Absolutely right. Before I knew about suicide prevention, the Turnpike Bridge up in Clark Summit, I could remember when they put a phone up there.
Yep.
And I could remember even thinking myself, somebody's going to call before they jump. And then the fact is people do call because they don't want to end their life. They really don't. They just want that. And it may sound like a cliche, but it's very true. They want that pain to stop.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people, and that's why asking them is important because they may not be able to say anything, but they welcome being able to tell someone. And so,
well, obviously, it's a last resort.
Yes. Yeah.
And, maybe some people just need somebody to talk to. I mean, obviously.
Yeah.
So, high-risk groups.
Yeah. I'm wondering if this is going to change somewhat after the pandemic, to be honest with you. But right now, high-risk groups are middle-aged men for a lot of reasons. Women have more attempts, but men have more deaths caused by suicide. So middle-aged men, that's why it's so important to get physicians on board with this. Because if a middle-aged man is feeling depressed, sometimes you don't even know you're feeling this. Other people may say, boy, you're really angry, you're flying off the handle. And those are some signs of depression. Mm-hmm. And so you're not going to call up a psychologist or a psychiatrist. You're going to go to your family doctor, if you even go at all. The good news is there's so many resources on the internet now. You could Google suicide prevention assessment or survey, and there's so many websites that just ask you a couple questions. It's confidential, it's private, and they'll spit back to you what they think you should do.
Well, you talk about your family physician. So I've gone to my family doctor for years. Mm-hmm. Do you think he could pick up on if I wasn't right? If I was starting to have a problem, he probably wouldn't.
If, let's say you were feeling really down, or God forbid there were problems with your marriage or whatever, and you go to him and you say, I'm not sleeping, I'm flying off the handle, I would hope that a physician would be able to ask you some questions to further explore what's going on.
The basics.
The basics.
Sometimes they'll dive right in, go way in too deep, and just skip right over it.
Just the other day, we had someone who belongs to our organization. He lost his job, and it was a really good job. He lost his job. He lost his apartment. He was 50-some years old, and he said, I don't even have a girlfriend. He went to his family doctor and said, I'm just feeling down, blah, blah, blah. And the family doctor did nothing. Didn't even suggest antidepressants or whatever. Didn't, well, let's check your blood pressure, see how this is affecting you physically. And so real advocacy issues, which I hope we're going to talk about.
We're going to talk about anything you want to talk about.
Advocacy issues, family doctors are right on the front line of helping people. They really are. And some doctors feel comfortable and some don't. And some doctors will say, I don't want to ask the questions because then what do I do with that information? Mm-hmm. Do I make a referral to someone? And that's the second part of an advocacy issue is that who do you send someone to? If not all therapists are trained, in fact, most aren't trained. I think in northeastern PA, we hospitalize too frequently. I think as soon as someone, even a psychologist, as soon as someone hears the word suicide, they automatically think, well, let's send them for an evaluation to see if they need
the other thing I think about, and maybe this is just me, but I think they over-medicate a lot too.
Oh, yeah.
Right out of the gate.
I do too. It's a tough situation.
Well, you're depressed, here's a pill.
Yeah.
That's not the fix.
No, it's not. And especially because it doesn't act immediately. Antidepressants, anti-anxiety.
And they give you side effects that sometimes are worse.
Some.
Well.
Although I always say to people, I'm not pushing medication, but I'm always saying if it doesn't work for you, you could always stop it.
Right.
You could always, that's an easy one. Unfortunately, I know a lot of people that are on antidepressants.
Well, sure. Yeah. That's commonplace, but...
Yeah. But are they on the right amount?
Well,
are they on the right medication? There needs to be more exploration, I think.
There definitely does. And then somebody might start self-medicating, as in alcohol.
Yeah.
And then you mix that with antidepressants. Yeah. I don't know what the...
Well, let me tell you a big, that gentleman that stood up during one of our meetings who said his son was not doing well emotionally, was abusing substances, went to a rehab, kept talking to the professionals, is it mental health, is it addiction? And he was told so many different things. And once again, we don't know what came first, the chicken or the egg. Well, if you're from the mental health field, I think you think the mental health issues came first and you're self-medicating. If you're in the addiction field, I think you lean more towards addiction is causing problems that may lead to depression.
So your Northeast Suicide Prevention Initiative, how do you get involved? How do people get in touch with you?
We have a Facebook page where we have continuing information for lost survivors, people who've lost someone to suicide, attempt survivors, people who've attempted suicide. And that's a whole show in itself, too. Who did they talk to?
Yeah.
And so one of our advocacy issues is getting, in this area, an attempt survivor support group. We have a lost survivor support group that meets once a month, and it's people, friends, family who lost someone to suicide, because who better could understand and help each other.
And for those folks, it never goes away.
No, it never does.
Never goes away.
No, it doesn't. Someone said this, a mom said this, and it's true, it gets gentler, but that takes years too. But we have a website. The website gives you information. It doesn't turn over as much as the Facebook page, obviously. We are run all by volunteers. Right. No one gets paid. And the only reason we exist is on donations. So we're very careful what we spend our money on. So I don't want to give somebody $200 to do the Facebook page.
Right.
So
well, maybe somebody listening is going to be sympathetic and want to throw some money your way. Wonderful. I hope they would. So I have to say how, you and I connected. So my friend that lost his son said, you got to when I became commissioner, I mean, I think it wasn't not too long after, you got to meet Kathy Walsh. You got to talk to Kathy Walsh. And we got a pandemic thrown at us, so I got sidelined for a little bit doing things that I wanted to do. But you had I think it was postponed, but you had
We have a walk every year the week after the Italian festival.
Right, okay.
And last year, obviously, we didn't have the walk. So we had a drive-through
At Naog.
up at Naog.
Yep.
And someone said, there's Chris Chermak. He's a commissioner. So we went over and I started talking, and immediately, I know that this embarrasses you sometimes, but you're my hero for this. You really are. You said, come and talk to me. I said, we need a countywide task force, coalition, alliance, whatever. We need it. So you gave me your card, and that was on a Saturday. On Monday, I said, well, I don't want to jump on it right now. I'll wait till sometime this week. And by Tuesday, you had already talked to our county mental health program, and you called me and said, let's get together and let's talk about putting a group together.
And we did. And that
we
was, I met you September 12th,
Yeah.
I think.
Yes.
At the drive-in at the Naog Park.
And it was
which was a nice event.
Yeah, it was.
And in December,
Yeah.
we formed the Lackawanna County Suicide Prevention Alliance.
Yes.
With the help of you, Tim Rowland, our county coroner.
He's been wonderful.
Yep, good friend. And someday I'll get him on the show, too.
That would be interesting.
Who else was there? We had Marie
Anakovich from NAMI. We had Mike Nelson, who's our president of our organization. Yep. We had Tim, you,
and Mary Ann
Colbert from the mental health program.
So from the county, right?
Yes.
And Mary Ann she's busy, and she's been wonderful. She embraced this and has been
wonderful,
fabulous. So, and I want everybody to know we started that. We had our first. When did we have our first meeting?
I think it was in November or October or November. And we were thinking, especially because of the pandemic, our organization was thinking, well, let's start this at the beginning of the year. Yeah. And you said, no, let's start it as soon as we can.
Right now.
So that was the beginning of December.
We did. We did a combination Zoom in person. And graciously enough, we can use the 911 center. Lets us use their
So people could
command.
Come. Anybody could come. You don't have to sign up for anything.
Yep.
You could come in person. You could call and get the Zoom number if you want to be in the meeting on that. And I really need to say I'm surprised at how many people jumped on board to this.
Well, I have somewhere in my notes here. Because I could never remember all these groups, but we have not only the county people. This meeting starts at 5:00 in the afternoon. Yeah. We didn't ask anybody. We didn't tell anybody they had to be there. Yeah. We had, I think, on our first night, we had close to 40 participants. Yeah. We had the district attorney, Mark Powell, Jeannie Rosenkrantz from the district attorney's office. Yep. We had Bill Browning from Human Services. We had Jason Kavulich from Area on Aging. I highlighted a lot of the county people because they don't have to do this.
No.
People need to realize that we have some phenomenal people that work at the county.
Yes.
And these people are dedicated and they work 24/7.
And I need to say, too, and as you go through the list see if anybody else you want to mention.
Well, I'm going to mention lots,
Every task force that I know of meets during the day.
Yeah.
And we were so thrilled when you said, hey, I'll go. What do you want, 5:00? And I said yes, because that allows people who lost someone to suicide or who has suicide feelings of family members to be a part of this where they wouldn't be able to if it was during the day.
Right. And some of our folks, I know some of these folks that were there, even some of our county people and some that aren't from the county. I can see they have their child sitting on their seat, on their lap during the meeting, which I love that. That's fine. Yeah. But they're home and they don't need to be here. No. And the nice thing is, hey, if you can't make it this meeting, you will see you at the next one. But we have military, we have the Veterans Affairs people, we have the state police has a representative that attends. Scranton Counseling,
Valhalla Veterans,
Yep.
Friendship House, Scranton Counseling Center.
it just goes.
The youth shelter, which I was Maureen Gray, I was thrilled because she works with at-risk youth, and that's another
Yep.
high-risk group.
Yep. Just looking here, and there's also lost survivors too that
Yes.
have no ties
Yes.
to any real
Yes.
groups, but
Yeah.
you know,
They
it's
wanna
nice
be
to
a
have
part of
them.
it. Yeah.
Absolutely, and their input is, I mean, it's we need it.
Yeah.
And I know sometime in the future I'm going to have Mariana Kovic on a Kovich, right?
Yeah. On
On
the
a
cabbage.
Kovich. Well, I want to have her on, but they're from NAMI, and
Yeah.
NAMI is another support group. So
Owen Doherty, who is a person with learned experience, and he shares that openly. He's the president of NAMI, and
Yep.
right now he's working for the Right Center. So,
Okay.
in fact, he just gave me a call the other day, and I love when people reach out like this. He gave me a call, and he said, Kathy, what's your suggestion if we have someone who calls the physician's offices and they're feeling suicidal? What can we do while we look for a therapist to talk to them? Because they also have behavioral health there. And we ended up talking about writing a script for the receptionist that engages them, that supports them until a therapist could be found in the building.
yeah,
We get calls from schools. I got a call from a school in Luzerne County who lost, unfortunately, a young lady who was on the soccer team, very popular young lady, and they wanted to put her jersey in the case when you walk in the school, and they didn't know whether they should do that or not. And I do a lot of reading and research, and so the recommendation for schools is that you don't do anything that you wouldn't do if someone died by cancer, died in a car accident. What would you do if she died in a car accident? And they said, well, we'd have a small group and take her jersey and give it to the family. I said, well, that's what you do.
that's what you do.
That's what you do.
You know, and that reminded me of something that you brought up last night. You played that little video clip
Yes.
about how we say committed suicide.
Yes.
And it's not. It's died by
Yeah.
suicide.
You don't commit kidney disease.
Yeah.
And it used to be, I guess, a law. And certainly in the Catholic Church, it was a sin, which it is not now. It's certainly not a law that we understand it a little bit more. Nobody chooses this. I think we talked a little bit about that last night, too.
Yeah.
Nobody chooses it. One thing that, and it's hard. It's hard to stop saying commit.
Right.
Because that's
I
what
still
you
say
always
it,
said.
but I catch myself now.
Yeah. And that's the first step. It's someone died by suicide or they ended their life. We used to say, it was a successful suicide. Successful? No. You don't say it was a successful heart operation when the person died. You have to, once again, think of it as physical health.
Yeah.
And treat it like that. And schools, everybody's so afraid of it. So afraid of suicide, saying
Well, it's been taboo for
Absolutely.
forever.
Yeah. And there's the good thing is there's so many tools out there on the internet, Chris.
Now
So
it's-
many tools.
we
There is fantastic toolkits for schools on what to do because there's still questions. You know, kids want to wear a shirt with the youth's picture on it. The school doesn't want them to. So it's a memorial. Don't plant a tree.
Yeah.
You know, find the person's interests and do some volunteer work with that in their name. Have a walk at your school. Have an awareness event.
Certainly.
And so there's so much out there.
Just like you said, the same thing you would do for somebody that lost their
Absolutely.
life in a car
Yes, that's
accident or
absolutely
anything.
right. Yep.
So, no. You know what I found interesting last night, too, after everybody left, because I always have to turn the lights off and shut everything down. And I went into where the dispatchers are, because we electronically lock doors, and they were all asking questions now.
Wow.
Because
That's great.
they don't get the call that I think I'm going to take my own life tonight. But they were interested in what we were talking about because, like, just prior to that, they received a phone call. So
Yeah.
they get the bad news, or
Yes.
they're dispatching police and EMS, but it's already too late.
Yeah.
And it's traumatic for these guys.
Terribly traumatic.
So, we have in place, and that's another name, Bobby Carpenter from the Northeast
Yes.
EMS. So
he's been
there.
wonderful.
He's great.
He's
great.
wonderful.
He's very involved. He doesn't miss a meeting, and he's our ticket to police, fire, EMTs, paramedics.
He came to a couple of trainings that we've had.
Yep.
It's wonderful.
Yep. And these folks at the 911 center, I mean, they're first responders. They're the first one to get the call.
Yes.
And it's traumatic to them as well.
Very true. I can't even imagine being on a phone. I received a message once from a coworker who decided to end their life. And he called me to thank me for being his friend and all this stuff. And I thought I was going to faint listening to that. And thank God we got him in time.
No.
So that was a happy ending.
That's
yes.
a good.
Yeah.
So it was nice. It was nice to me that these guys were guys and girls. They were interested. They wanted to know, and they're very impressed that this is continuing and moving forward. And
people are thrilled, absolutely thrilled that we have this alliance. Yeah, I think suicide touches so many people.
Well, you gave me this bracelet.
Yeah. Yes.
Which is,
yes.
I wore out another one.
We have to get rid of them because hopefully next year there's going to be a 3-digit number out there.
We hope, right?
Yes, we hope.
But I said I wouldn't take it off till this was created. Well, we have it created, but I don't want to take it off yet. So I'm going to keep it on.
I only have 200 more of them. So.
All right, we'll save one for me.
Okay.
But as we've moved on here, just to let folks know, we've come up with a great group of people, and now we started to break it down into focus groups, and what are the top priorities in those groups, and things that we talked about last night, because people don't realize this, and we can talk about this, but I'll name the 3. We had improving emergency room experience, because that's we'll talk about, is not good. School and youth, and then supporting needs of first responders.
Yeah.
So, but going to the emergency room, you check yourself in, or if you're checked in and you're put in put in a gown and put in a cot and you're laying in a hallway. Potentially,
yeah. Some hospitals are better than others. But when I was working in this advocacy agency, we would get so many calls from hospital staff. Can't you do something with our emergency room? Because our people are not treated well there. And some hospitals do make you get right into a gown, strip you down. One of the things that I thought of when I was making notes for this is that we've come so far in the treatment of cancer, diabetes, heart disease, but we haven't come that far when it comes to suicide.
Labor and delivery.
Prevention.
You look like you're in your own suite.
Yes, yeah. And I respect the fact that you have to make sure it's in a room that's safe. But there has to be a better system. Yeah. First of all, it's so bad, it takes hours. And that's not always the hospital's fault. That could be getting insurances squared away. That could be finding a psychiatrist to go over what was told to them in an evaluation. But it's such an awful experience that is not empathetic usually. Sometimes we talk about, a lot of times we talk about training, but you have to have a good personality too. Yeah. You have to care about what I think we mentioned that last night.
We did.
You have to care. And I think that I did a program with a group of young people, and we talked about, would you tell someone if you were feeling suicidal? And unfortunately, 100% of them, and a lot of them had emotional problems, so they've had experience with this. 100% said no, because I don't ever want to go to the hospital again, or I don't want to go to the hospital. So we have to get past that, because if that's one of the reasons that people aren't asking for help, because they think that as soon as they say the word suicide, they're going to be shipped to a psychiatric unit.
Right.
And that's not always the way it happens.
No, it's not. And the nice thing too is we have all our hospitals were represented, and they're there, and they're listening to what we're talking about, and they're participating in the conversation.
Yes.
Well, they're there.
And hopefully we'll be having separate meetings with them also, because this alliance could identify issues, and it could talk about resources. but we don't have power to change things at that kind of level. Why we're talking about the Alliance, one of the things that we are missing, that maybe if someone's watching, faith leaders.
Right.
We don't have faith leaders. And once again, so many people go to their faith leader when they're feeling emotional problems, they're having problems in their marriage. Relationships are one of the main reasons anymore that the researchers have identified why people end their lives is relationship problems.
Yep.
And so faith leaders really need to be on board with this. They really do. So if there's any faith leaders out there, please
They're
give
welcome.
us a call.
They're welcome.
Yes.
And that's what's nice about our group. It keeps growing, and we'll get them.
Yeah.
It's been this has been a tough go to try to form something in the middle of a worldwide I still can't believe we're in a worldwide pandemic, but we are. But we're hopefully getting to the end of that. Yeah. But the nice thing is there's an open discussion.
Yes.
We have great turnout. People are interested.
Yes.
They're enthusiastic.
They really are.
And I can see it's going to make a difference.
Getting back to the 3 focus groups.
Yeah.
I mean, there's tons of work to do, and each focus group I think could identify 5 more focus groups. But out of those 3, I know youth is a very high risk group, but that's probably the safest area because of the law in Pennsylvania that educators have to have 4 hours of training every 5 years on suicide prevention. So one of I was in the focus group for youth, and one of the things that was identified is that the relationship between schools and the mental health system has improved so much. And that was so good to hear. I've been in the mental health field for a long time, and it was always like, well, these are your kids. No, they're your kids. No, they're your kids. And they're our kids, bottom line. And I think we've reached that point. They are our kids.
Yeah.
They're our community kids. And there's resources out there for kids. And I think that they're much more apt to get help than an adult is, because somebody could take them by the hand and lead them there. And sometimes when you're feeling down, depressed, you're having relationship problems, you're going through a divorce, it has to rely on other people helping you through it. Don't just say, call me if you need anything.
Well, the
Go
thing
over and visit.
What I learned in the short time is all the help that is out there that I had no idea.
Yes, yeah.
And, we're going to put the numbers up, and I'm going to put this will be up for display for people to see, but there are numbers to call for all sorts of issues. So there is help.
Yes.
And I think even just the 211 number will get you.
Yes.
The Pennsylvania 211 number will get you.
Hopefully it'll connect you with somebody, whether you lost someone to suicide and you're looking for some support, or you need to talk to somebody. The thing that's difficult to get is if you're worried about someone, because funding for mental health is really not all that great, to say the least.
Not a priority.
No.
Nope.
And it stops agencies from freeing up their people to go to trainings. And that was another thing that came across on our focus group, is that it's really hard for agencies to free people up to go learn about assessment and management of suicidal thoughts and behaviors. But the help is out there, like you said. There's a national number that's confidential, that's free, that you could talk to. Govan Martin, who started,
mention him.
He started. He was involved with Prevent Suicide PA. Now he has his own organization that's much more grassroots, I think. He's having a webinar, in fact, tomorrow on loss survivors. So he's going to have a lot of information and support for people who lost someone to suicide. But one thing that he said is that someone told him they called the national number and they were 6th in line waiting to talk to someone. And they said during the pandemic, one of the things that has increased is the calls to suicide prevention hotlines, crisis lines.
Well, you don't want to call the suicide helpline and says, please hold.
Yes.
That's not a good thing.
Absolutely right.
So, but
absolutely right.
It's tough times, but
Yeah.
Govan Martin, what's the name of his organization?
Suicide Prevention Alliance.
Okay.
A lot of alliances, good alliances out there.
And he's been good with us.
He's been fantastic
He's a knowledgeable,
to us. Yes.
I think he's a 25-year veteran of the Pennsylvania State Police.
Lost his brother to suicide, and so very passionate and committed.
Yep, and he'll. I know if somebody reached out to him, he'd be the first one to talk to them.
I can't tell you, he's met people at conferences, and he'll follow up with the call to see if they're okay.
Yeah.
He's really our connection, NSPI. He's our connection to what's going on in the world of suicidology. He gets national speakers to come in, and I just can't say enough for his connections. And even when I do a training, I always say to people, you don't have to remember everything that we talked about in this training, especially for schools. But if there's one person in your organization or school that has an interest and could be a resource for you, know who to call.
Yep. Well, that's the thing. You got to know who to call. And that's what I said. I didn't realize what we had available to us just here locally. Yeah. So we'll get those numbers out to everybody. I know we talked about, and I can't remember what it stands for, CAMS. We talked about
CAMS,
that.
Collaborative Assessment and Management of Suicidology. It's called suicidality. And that's and as Govan said, there's not one trained therapist in Pennsylvania. It's such it's so simple to go to a training. You could do it over the internet, 4 hours, 5 hours, and it is an evidence-based. Someone asked that last night. It is an evidence-based training.
Yeah.
And it shows therapists how to work with somebody who comes in with suicidal thoughts. And it's not necessarily, okay, you know what, you have to go up to CMC for an evaluation. It's not that, because that is so frightening to people.
Well, and then we talk about police, EMS.
Yes.
Now you're a police officer, and all of a sudden you start to have a problem.
Yeah.
You're going to be the last person to admit to anybody that you have suicidal ideations.
Absolutely.
Because you're going to lose your job, and which isn't, that's not the case.
No. We had Govan coming. In fact, let me put in a plug for Ski for Colin, okay?
Yeah.
Ski for Colin.
True to my heart. Right?
Yes. Ski for Colin is an organization that raises money for suicide prevention, and I can't say enough about the help that they've given us. Colin O'Rourke is the young man who lost his life, and his sister and his father and his girlfriend Janice just worked so hard. This year they didn't have a fundraiser, but they raise money. So we had a training for first responders, and I think we had almost 50 people there. And Govan came up to do the training. And once again, we talked about this last night. They're not going to listen to me. They're going to listen to someone who was a first responder, who has some background. He's a loss survivor and a first responder. So he came up and he started the training. But honestly, most of the training and how it ended up was with people admitting it's not easy. You're afraid of your job. You're afraid of the consequences of asking for help. And you could say, well, you might have an EAP program, but there's always that feeling it's not going to be confidential.
Yeah.
And what are you going to do with that? I have a theory that we talked about, police chiefs and all that, and you absolutely need that. But what you need is trained people. You need a trained person in law enforcement to do these trainings. You need a trained person in EMS to do these trainings and to be that resource. We were talking about physicians. Would a doctor be able to tell if there was something wrong? Yeah. Well, if you're in a fire department, let's say even a volunteer fire department, I could, and what we've gone through. You know that, a month ago, 6 months ago, we had a terrible accident that we had to help with. And somebody's really having a response, they can't get over that. Whether they keep going back to it and talking about it, or whether you notice a change in them, they're more quiet, or they're drinking more, because I'm assuming that you have a lot, that camaraderie.
Yeah.
Those peers need to be trained, and they need a policy and a procedure how to get help for someone.
Well, I can tell you, I'm a lifelong member of Clarksville Fire Company.
Mm-hmm.
I've been on that ambulance since I was a young kid, and I don't do it so much anymore. I don't have the time, which I still have the desire. I just don't have the time. But there's things that I've witnessed and been a part of that I'll never forget.
Yeah.
And it affects people differently, different people, different ways. And the O'Rourke family, Dan O'Rourke I feel I'm part of his family.
Yeah.
I've been a volunteer on Elk Mountain Ski Patrol with Dan I've been there 25 years. He's probably been there 40. I don't even sure how many he's been there. The Ski for Colin is not only a great success, we have so much fun with that. And it's a great time. And anybody that hopefully next year will have it, you have to come. Even if you don't ski, come to the event. There's baskets and music, and it's fun.
Yeah.
And it's a celebration for Colin, and we raise money.
And that's where people who lost someone to suicide need to get, where they celebrate someone's life, not be remembered for the way they died, the way they lived. And when you speak of Colin, there's a joy in your voice. I could hear it.
Well, there is. And he was just a good. And
it changes. It changes a family.
It does.
They're never the same.
No.
And one of the things you're not supposed to do is talk to someone and make them feel guilty about a suicide attempt, or how could you do this to your family? The reality is it does affect a family for the rest of their life. So if nothing else, you owe your family at least reach out to try to get some help.
Yep.
There are some people who feel suicidal their whole lives. No specific reason except their biology, their brain chemistry.
Apparently, Robin Williams was one of those folks.
Absolutely.
How would you ever expect that?
No.
No. That blew me away.
No. When I would see him on TV, honestly, I expected him to explode because he just was so rapid and so manicky.
Yep.
But no, you would never think.
Nope.
No. And that's when in our training, the one slide, it has maybe about 8 kids in it. And we say, which one to teachers, which one is the one who's thinking about suicide? You can't tell. That's why it's so important. The law right now trains educators, but we need to train bus drivers. We need to train cafeteria ladies. Who is really good, a wonderful resource, school nurses. Mm-hmm. I can't tell you how many times they'll say, I could tell there was something off.
Oh, sure.
And sometimes parents are afraid, so they do nothing. And I have to identify that for all the parents out there. Please don't be afraid. There's help out there. It's not your fault. It's absolutely not your fault. When I was working for that grant and I would talk to parents, some parents would be very, very open, and others would kind of make excuses. Well, they're not suicidal. I got him in the car, and I said, what'd you say you were suicidal for? And so they said, well, we just pushed the wrong button on the computer. Please just listen to your kids. You don't have to fix them. You can't fix them. You could help support someone and give them what they need so they could help themselves and accept help. You don't need to, but you don't know. You really don't know. Like you said, you were shocked when you heard about your cousin. I can't tell you, unfortunately, how many people that come to our support group that will say, my 16-year-old was helping me plan his birthday party for Saturday, and Wednesday he ended his life. Or my husband, who's 70-some, we just came back from a visit with our grandkids, and we had a marvelous time. he's home 2 days and he ends his life. That's the hard part about this. It's not A plus B equals C. It just isn't. That's why it's important to ask if you're concerned about someone.
Well, and that's what this discussion's about. That's what this episode is about. Yeah. That's what our alliance is about.
Yes.
It's get the word out, get the information out, and people need to be aware.
Yeah.
And people need to be aware that it's okay to talk about,
yes.
and there's a lot of help.
Yes. And there's a lot of people out there that want to help you.
There is.
There really is.
There's good people.
Yeah.
Look at, how did we get to, it just, these things work out for a reason.
Yes, I think so.
One of my good friends, which we've mentioned, I'm not going to say his name now, but we've talked about him during this podcast, but he said, whenever you're done with being a commissioner, whether it's 4 years, 8 years, or whatever you do, he said, probably the best thing that you would have done was help create the Suicide Prevention Alliance. And when you asked me that day that you've been trying to get this for years and nobody wanted to listen, no. Why wouldn't somebody listen to that? How easy I made a couple phone calls and people jumped on board. It was nothing. Yes. But I'm going to stay involved because I want to. And these people are thrilled to be a part of it.
They are.
So what was the problem? What was the problem? It wasn't, I guess maybe, does it get votes? I'm not looking,
I don't know.
I mean, I don't know.
You are going to go down in history.
Well, that's not why.
That's not why you're doing it. And I know that you get embarrassed when I say that, but you have no idea how meaningful this is for people who've lost someone.
It's the right thing to do. Everybody asks, well, not everybody. People ask me, why do you want to support the veterans so much? I'm not a veteran. Because it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do.
You're absolutely right.
You know, we owe everything we have in this country to our veterans.
Yeah.
So if somebody asks me to do something, I'm going to do it.
I don't know if you remember, but after our first alliance meeting, a woman came up to me. She's part of our lost survivor group, and you were standing there, and she said, "Thank you so much. You've given me a reason to live." And she obviously is still devastated by the loss of her daughter, who was a very successful, beautiful woman in her own right. But her mom just couldn't move forward. And now she has a purpose, she feels. And everyone is so thankful that you're doing this. Most people have been touched by suicide. They really have been.
To me, it was... I had to do it. I wanted to do it. I felt that was the right thing to do. That's just the way it is.
It is.
Okay, well, enough about me. That's not why we're here.
That is the reason we're here.
Well,
because of what you did.
Well, I'm happy that we're here talking about this.
I'm thrilled.
But I want people to look forward to more information coming out. You know, we talk about the internet. The internet was probably the worst thing and best thing to ever happen to us. There's so much good information as well as bad, but as good information, phone numbers, people, you can find anything out you want to know about resources. So it's definitely a great tool. We use it. And they can always reach out to me if they have questions. I will certainly do what I can to get them in the right direction. And the simple 211 number.
Yes.
If anything, just remember the 211.
Yeah.
You can call them and ask them for the lottery numbers if you want to. Whatever. Just remember 211. You can get help with COVID vaccinations, suicide, you name it.
Getting
They'll
help
help you.
Loss, absolutely.
Yep. So it's a start. It's definitely a start. So all good stuff.
All good stuff is right.
Anything else you'd like to add before we?
No, I just can't say how thankful I am that this alliance is here. Please get involved in it. Once again, you don't have to sign up for anything. You don't have to say, I'm going to make every meeting. Your input is so important. People who've lost someone, EMTs, couple years ago, we lost 3 in one year, in the matter of a couple weeks, really. Please reach out, become a part of something that's really wonderful.
Yep. And we're there, and everybody's willing to help, and it's a great thing, and we love to listen to anybody's input.
Absolutely.
So we're going to be there, and reach out to me at my office. And I'm always available. I tell everybody, I think I say it every episode, I go to work at 7:30 in the morning, and I'm there.
Yeah.
So I'm easy to get a hold of. Send me an email. I'll get back to you. So, but I appreciate you coming on.
I so appreciate you asking.
And I look forward to our next meeting and moving forward with our the Northeast Suicide Prevention Alliance. We're going to do some great things, and it's going to do a lot of good for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But I thank you.
Thank you.
I want to thank Kathy Wallace for joining us today. I think we went over some good information. There's some phone numbers out there if anybody needs any help. We're going to post the information, so take a look. If you know anybody out there that needs help, there's help out there. We did talk about a lot of good things. We went over some of the myths of suicide. This is a tough thing to talk about. But during this pandemic, I think it's an important time to do it. And Kathy certainly made it an easy discussion. I enjoyed it, and I appreciate everybody tuning in. Remember, this is all paid for by the Friends of Chris Chermak. So if you like this episode or you like any of our episodes, feel free to send a donation along to the Friends of Chris Chermak. Next week, we're going to switch gears a little bit. I reached out to 3 of the candidates that are running for the Lackawanna County judge. This is not going to be a roundtable discussion. I'm going to interview each candidate one at a time. We're going to put it together for one podcast. We have attorney Nisha Aurora, we have attorney Mary Walsh Dempsey, and we have the Honorable Paul Ware, District Magistrate. Just to get a little bit of information out so you guys can meet the candidates. It's going to be very simple. I think it'll be very informative. So I look forward to seeing you all next week. Thanks for tuning in.